Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we really dig into historical records, add in some amazing modern science, and try to unlock family mysteries, sometimes ones that have been hidden for, well, over 100 years.
And today we're doing just that. This one is specifically for the descendants and relations of a man named James Charles Bull. We're opening up a pretty dramatic story, a century-old secret from the Deep South, right on the border of Alabama and Mississippi.
Yeah, the heart of it is the unsolved murder of J.C. Bull, James Charles Bull. He was shot, killed in an ambush back in 1903. But the mystery, it's got layers. It's not just about who did it.
No, no, not at all. It's also about this secret identity that one of the key figures kept up for decades. I mean, so well kept that it really took modern DNA testing to finally figure out the truth.
That's a really important point you make there. We need to be clear. What we're focusing on today is that journey of discovery, how the truth about who someone was finally came out.
Exactly. But the original crime, the murder itself, that part is still officially unsolved. And that leaves the family today grappling with some, well, some pretty big unanswered questions and ambiguities.
Okay, so let's set the scene. James Charles Bull, born January 11th, 1856. And the date on his headstone, it's January 11th, 1903. Killed on his 47th birthday.
Yeah, a really stark detail. Shot dead in Choctaw County, Alabama. That date, that place, it marks a very sudden, violent end.
And the location is key, right? You mentioned the borderlands.
Absolutely crucial. You have to picture Choctaw County, Alabama, and Clark County, Mississippi, right next to each other. Around 1900, those state lines, they weren't like hard walls.
People just moved back and forth.
All the time. Families lived there, they married across the line, moved homes across the line. It was fluid. But, that also meant it could be a volatile area. Local disputes, feuds, they could easily spill across jurisdictions. Makes things complicated.
And it complicates the records from the get-go, doesn't it? Especially his birthplace.
It does. His death, his later life, that's clearly Alabama. But where was he born? Some later documents might say Alabama.
But the census records.
Right. The primary sources, the censuses taken during his life, they consistently say Mississippi.
Which is a big deal for anyone tracing the family tree.
It really is. It shows how you have to be careful with records. Was the census taker writing down where he lived then or where he was actually born? The pattern in the census points strongly to Mississippi.
So that's the starting point. A man tied to this very specific border region with even his origins having a bit of ambiguity.
Exactly. But the family was definitely rooted right there where those two states meet.
Okay, let's move into his life there. He married Susan Margaret Elizabeth Long. What do we know about that?
Well, like the birthplace, there was initially some confusion about the marriage date. Different sources, different dates.
So how did you pin it down?
Deduction, mainly using the 1880 census again. We can pretty confidently say they married around January 26, 1876 in Choctaw County, Alabama.
And the census is the key because
Because in 1880, it lists their first child, Maddie Laura Bull, as being 2 years old. So she must have been born around 1878.
I see. So if another record said they married later, like 1879, that wouldn't work because Maddie was already born.
Precisely. The child's age makes the earlier date the only possibility. The census acts like a fact checker for the timeline.
Makes sense. And they had other children too.
Yes, 4 known children in total. Maddie Laura, and she becomes absolutely central to this whole story later on. Then Minnie Love, Homer Lee, and Nora Darling.
Is there like a family photo or anything?
There is a really poignant one, actually, taken probably around the turn of the century. It shows J.C. and Margaret with their 3 daughters. Just a glimpse of the family life that was about to be completely shattered.
Okay, now, before we get to the murder in 1903, you mentioned a history of violence. This wasn't the first time J.C. Bull faced danger.
Not at all. And this context is absolutely essential to understanding everything that happened later. We're talking about a serious violent assault 8 years before he was killed.
What happened?
It's known as the 1895 Boykin Assault. It happened on Christmas Eve, 1895, at some kind of gathering in a place called Hinton.
Christmas Eve. Wow.
Yeah. According to J.C. Bull's own sworn complaint afterwards, 3 men from the Boykin family, Frank Boykin, Saul Boykin Sr., and Corny Boykin, attacked him with intent to murder.
Intent to murder. That's serious. Did they injure him?
Severely. The local newspaper report at the time is quite graphic. Said he was cut in 7 places, and for a while they didn't think he'd survive.
Cut 7 times. He pulled through, obviously, but that must have left a mark, mentally and probably socially too.
Absolutely. Surviving something like that, especially on Christmas Eve. It likely changed everything. How he interacted with people who his enemies were. It clearly put him right in the middle of some serious local feuds.
Okay, this is where it gets really complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because someone involved in that incident shows up later.
This is the part that's just historically stunning. A real twist of dramatic irony. Remember Joseph J. Haney, the man who would later be indicted for Bull's murder?
Yeah, his son-in-law.
Right. Well, back in 1895, during this Boykin assault case, Joe Haney wasn't the enemy. He was actually a key ally, a state witness for J.C. Bull against the Boykins.
Wait, what? They were on the same side?
Exactly. Fighting the same people. Haney even filed his own separate complaint against Frank Boykin for carrying a concealed pistol illegally during the incident. He was actively supporting Bull.
That completely changes the picture. The family story is often about a dispute over Haney marrying Bull's daughter, Maddie.
That's the common lore, yeah. But this 1895 incident throws huge doubt on that being the sole reason for the murder 8 years later. They were allies in 95. Maddie and Joseph got married in 1896.
So the relationship seems like it was okay, even cooperative, at least initially.
It certainly looks that way,
Hmm.
which means that old court case, this Teat versus Frank R. Boykin, it forces us to look deeper. Was the murder in 1903 really about the marriage? Or was it tied into this whole web of local conflicts?
Conflicts that involved more than just Bull and the Boykins.
It seems likely. The court records from that time suggest the Boykin family had issues not just with James Charles Bull, but also with Calvin Haney.
Calvin Haney. Wasn't he one of the other men indicted along with Joe Haney for Bull's murder later on?
The very same one. So you see the connection. The Boykins were apparently in conflict with both J.C. Bull and Calvin Haney years before the murder.
Okay, so the big question then is, was the 1903 killing a brand new fight? Maybe there's something personal between Bull and Joe Haney that flared up? Or was it just the next bloody chapter in a long-running feud involving the Haneys and the Bulls against other groups like the Boykins?
That's the unanswered question. It paints a picture of that borderland community as, well, not exactly peaceful. Grudges ran deep, violence was a possibility, and maybe alliances shifted depending on who you needed on your side at that moment.
And J.C. Bull survived being cut 7 times, lived 8 more years.
Only to be killed in an ambush by someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe someone connected to that same violent history.
Which brings us to that fatal day, January 11th, 1903, his 47th birthday.
Yeah, that life, full of conflict and ties to that border region, it ended right there. Killed in a roadside ambush, a deliberate homicide in Choctaw County, Alabama, near the Mississippi line.
And the law responded?
They did. It took some time, but in 1904, the Choctaw County grand jury acted. They handed down what's called a true bill.
Meaning they believed there was enough evidence to go to trial?
Correct. Enough evidence to formally charge 3 men with the murder of Jim Bull. That's what they called him by shooting him with a gun.
And the names on that indictment?
Calvin Haney, John Lewis, and Joseph Joe Haney.
Joe Haney, the son-in-law, the former ally from the Boykin case. That must have sent shockwaves through the family and the community.
Absolutely. This wasn't just some random name. This was family. Married to JC's daughter Maddie since 1896. The indictment painted it as a direct familial betrayal.
And adding to that shock, Joe Haney wasn't just anybody in town, was he?
No, far from it. This is another layer that makes the story so scandalous, really. Just 4 months before the killing, in September 1902, Joe Haney had been appointed Notary Public and Justice of the Peace in Choctaw County.
Wow. Justice of the Peace. That's not a small thing, especially
Yeah.
back then in the rural South. That's a position of trust, right?
Immense trust. JPs handled minor legal issues, swore oaths, kept the peace. They were figures of local authority and respect.
So, to have your local Justice of the Peace indicted for murdering his own father-in-law, that's not just a family tragedy. That's a major public scandal, a betrayal of public trust.
It really highlights maybe the chaotic or contradictory nature of life there sometimes.
Yeah.
The legal process moved forward, but, well, it ended up being incomplete.
How so? What happened to the 3 men?
We know from the records that Calvin Haney and John Lewis, the other 2 indicted men, they were arrested. They actually stood trial.
And what was the verdict for them?
Later research confirmed they were acquitted, found not guilty.
Acquitted. That's significant. If the state couldn't convince a jury about those 2,
It definitely raises questions, doesn't it? If the case against Calvin Haney and John Lewis wasn't strong enough for a conviction, how strong was the case against the 3rd man, Joe Haney?
but we never found out in court, did we? What happened with Joe Haney?
His fate was entirely different. The sources are crystal clear on this. Joseph J. Haney was indicted for murder, yes, but he immediately fled Choctaw County.
He ran.
He ran. Warrants were issued for his arrest, but he was never caught, never apprehended. Joe Haney was never brought to trial for the murder of James Charles Bull. He just disappeared.
He became a fugitive.
Exactly. And that act of fleeing, that's the absolute pivot point of this whole story. He didn't stick around to fight the charges, to hear the evidence, to let a jury decide.
He basically judged himself, or at least knew he couldn't stay.
You could see it that way. Whether it was guilt or just realizing his position was impossible, maybe fearing reprisal regardless of the legal outcome, we don't know. But because he fled, we lost the chance for the truth that a trial might have revealed. No testimony under oath, no cross-examination, no public presentation of the evidence against him.
So the family back in Alabama, J.C. Bull's widow and other children, they were just left with the indictment and his disappearance.
That's right. The grand jury believed there was enough evidence to charge him. His flight seemed to confirm suspicion in many eyes. But legally, because he was never tried, the case against him just stalled, functionally closed, unresolved.
Now, that family lore about the motive, the dispute over the marriage to Maddie, we've kind of cast doubt on that being the whole story.
Yeah, it seems questionable, doesn't it? Married 7 years, 4 kids together. They were allies years before. If the marriage itself was the core issue, why did it explode in 1903, not 1896?
So something else must have happened. Maybe tied to those other feuds, or maybe something new and sudden we just don't know about?
It seems much more likely. Whatever the trigger was, the immediate consequence was Joe Haney fleeing. But he didn't flee alone, did he?
No. And this is the part that's just so difficult, especially for the descendants. Maddie Laura Bull, J.C. Bull's daughter, Joe Haney's wife, she went with him.
Absolute, unwavering loyalty.
Yeah.
That's the human core of this mystery that echoes down through the generations.
You really have to stop and think about that choice. Why? Why would Maddie, who surely loved her father, leave her grieving, widowed mother, leave her siblings, abandon her entire life and community?
To run away with the man indicted for killing her father? It's an almost impossible choice to imagine. A total break from everything she knew.
What does that imply? That's the question everyone must ask.
It's pure speculation, of course, but you have to wonder. Did she genuinely believe he was innocent? Was she convinced the state got it wrong? Maybe like the jury later decided about the other 2 men?
Or did she know something else? Maybe something about the confrontation itself? Did she feel the killing was justified somehow? That her father wasn't entirely blameless in whatever happened?
Or was it simply absolute loyalty to her husband, the father of her children, prioritizing her immediate family unit, their survival, over justice or loyalty to her birth family?
We can't know her exact thoughts, but her actions speak volumes.
They do. She made an active choice. She became a fugitive alongside him. And that choice dictated the next 100 years of history for their descendants. To protect Joe, to protect their family, she helped erase their past.
Let's talk about that erasure. How did they do it?
They fled Alabama, moved across the South. We know they were in Florida briefly, and eventually landed in South Carolina. They settled in Williamsburg County around 1905.
And they needed new identities.
Completely new identities to bury the past. Joseph J. Haney, the fugitive justice of the peace from Alabama, became James Wesley Stewart.
And Maddie.
Maddie Laura Bull became Maddie Laura Bonner.
Bonner. Where did that name come from? Is it significant?
That's one of those details lost to time, it seems. Maybe a family name from further back, maybe just plucked from thin air, but they stuck with it.
And this wasn't just a casual thing. They were really committed to these new names.
Absolutely. We have proof. The first documented use of the alias J.W. Stewart appears on a health certificate. It was filed in Jacksonville, Florida on October 9th, 1905.
So just 2 years after the murder and flight, they established the new identities very quickly.
Yes, it was a calculated, deliberate move right from the start, and they lived under these names, James Wesley Stewart and Maddie Laura Bonner, for the rest of their lives.
Raised a family under these false names?
11 children, all raised as Stewarts, likely never knowing their father's real name or the story behind their move.
And the ultimate irony. What did James Wesley Stewart do in South Carolina?
This is almost unbelievable. He became a respected local magistrate in South Carolina.
You're kidding? He became a judge again?
Effectively, yes. A local magistrate, a position of public trust and authority, the very thing he was in Alabama before he was accused of murder and fled.
Wow. So the man running from the law for murder in one state becomes a respected legal figure in another under a false name.
It's an incredible story of successful deception. The secret was buried so deep for so long, over a century, that this new identity, this lie, became the foundation for a whole new, respected branch of the family.
And they were serious about maintaining it, weren't they? Even within the family.
Fiercely serious. There are later photographs, for example, of Maddie's own mother, Susan Margaret Longbull, back in Alabama. On the back of these photos, someone, presumably Maddie or Joe, wrote notes using the fake Bonner surname for Maddie.
Even when dealing with the original Bull family member.
Seems so. That alias permeated everything. It created a solid brick wall for anyone trying to trace the Stewart family history back beyond South Carolina. It just seemed a dead end there.
Which must have been incredibly frustrating for genealogists for decades, trying to find records for James Wesley Stewart or Maddie Laura Bonner before South Carolina.
And finding absolutely nothing, because those people didn't exist before 1905. The adopted identities worked perfectly as a dead end for traditional research for a century.
Until modern science came along.
Exactly. This is where DNA testing completely changed the game in the 2010s. It provided the irrefutable scientific proof that James Wesley Stewart, the respected magistrate, was one and the same as Joseph Haney, the fugitive.
And the proof wasn't just from one test, right? It was multiple lines of evidence.
That's what makes it so incredibly solid. 3 different types of DNA tests all pointed to the same conclusion. It's important for the descendants listening to understand how this works, why it's so conclusive.
Okay, break it down for us. First type.
Let's start with Y DNA. Think of it like a genetic surname. It's passed down directly from father to son, almost unchanged, generation after generation.
So if you're a male Stewart descendant,
Your Y DNA should trace directly back to James Wesley Stewart's father and so on. So tests were done on direct male line descendants, men like Randy Stewart and Frontis Stewart.
and what did their Y-DNA show?
It showed they belonged to a specific genetic group, a haplogroup called IFGC2173. And crucially, further research showed that this exact haplogroup is strongly associated with the known Haney family of Choctaw County, Alabama.
Wow. So even though the name was Stewart, the male line DNA was screaming Haney?
Precisely. The name was a lie created in 1905, but the Y chromosome carried the truth from generations before that. You can change your name, you can run across state lines if you can't change that genetic fingerprint.
Okay, that's compelling. What's the second type of DNA evidence?
That's autosomal DNA. This is the DNA you inherit from all your recent ancestors, mother, father, grandparents, great-grandparents, on all sides of your family.
So it's like a wider net.
Exactly. If Y DNA is the direct paternal line, autosomal DNA shows you your whole family reunion network of cousins, near and distant, across all branches.
And this is where Maddie's fake identity got exposed.
Irrevocably. Researchers tested the autosomal DNA of numerous descendants of the woman known as Maddie Laura Bonner Stewart, and those tests showed significant, undeniable genetic matches to known descendants of James Charles Bull's siblings.
His sisters and brother.
Yes, specifically descendants of Cornelia M.R. Bull, Laura Sophronia Bull, and Hammond Bull. Finding these strong DNA matches proved, scientifically, that Maddie Laura Bonner Stewart had to be Maddie Laura Bull, daughter of J.C. Bull. The cousin connections were too many and too close to be anything else.
Okay, Y-DNA links Stewart to Haney. Autosomal links Bonner to Bull. What's the third piece?
Mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA. This is passed down directly from a mother to all her children, but only her daughters pass it on. So it traces the direct maternal line, like a mother-to-mother highway back through time.
So tracing Maddie's mother's line.
Exactly. The mtDNA testing identified the specific maternal haplogroup for Maddie Laura Bull's line as H73. This genetic signature provided an unbroken maternal line tracing directly back to Maddie's mother, Susan Margaret Long.
So it confirms the Long connection on the mother's side.
It completes the triangle. You have Y-DNA proving the Haney paternal line for James Wesley Stewart. You have autosomal DNA proving the Bull family connection for Maddie Laura Bonner. And you have mtDNA proving the Long maternal line for Maddie Laura Bull.
All three pointing to the same hidden truth.
When you have that kind of convergence from 3 independent types of DNA evidence, the conclusion is inescapable. The identity mystery was solved. James Wesley Stewart was Joseph Haney. Maddie Laura Bonner was Maddie Laura Bull.
And that explains, finally, why the main suspect in the 1903 murder was never prosecuted.
Right. He wasn't lost to history or dead. He just walked away, changed his name, built a new life, and hid in plain sight, protected by that lie and Maddie's loyalty.
And this is the crucial point we have to keep coming back to. Solving the identity doesn't solve the original crime.
It absolutely doesn't. The DNA proved who James Wesley Stewart really was, and what he did after the indictment, he successfully became a fugitive. but it cannot tell us what actually happened that day on the Hinton Road.
It can't tell us if he was guilty of murder.
No. Was he a cold-blooded killer? Was it self-defense? Was it manslaughter? Was he even the one who pulled the trigger despite the indictment? We still don't know the ultimate truth of the event itself.
And that's the heavy legacy for the descendants today, isn't it? Knowing that their ancestor, this respected magistrate James Wesley Stewart, was also Joseph Haney, the man indicted for killing his father-in-law, a man who escaped justice through deception.
It forces a really difficult confrontation with the past, reconciling the memory of the man they knew as Stewart with the historical record of the fugitive Haney. That's maybe the deepest part of this whole story.
So looking back, it's an incredible journey. From that fight on Christmas Eve, 1895, where Bull and Haney were allies,
To the ambush in 1903, the indictment, the flight, Maddie's impossible choice.
the new identities, decades of silence, and then finally the DNA revealing the truth over a century later. It says so much about how long secrets can be kept, but also how persistent the truth can be, encoded right in our genes.
It really does. And it also speaks volumes about the hard work and dedication needed for this kind of genealogical breakthrough. It wasn't easy.
Absolutely. And we need to give credit where it's due. This wouldn't be known without some key people.
We absolutely must acknowledge the foundational research compiled by Stephen James Coker. His work really put together the historical framework, connecting the dots between Alabama and South Carolina.
And also the crucial contributions of Leah Chatham, particularly in tracing that Haney connection, linking the Stewarts back to the Alabama records.
Yes, and Jeanette Rexford Flowers, who unearthed those vital foundational court documents and also provided that incredible family photograph of Jim Bull. Those pieces were essential.
But none of the scientific proof, the DNA confirmation, would have been possible without one group.
That's right. The scientific linchpin, the proof from Y-DNA, autosomal and mitochondrial DNA, only came together because of the generosity and the commitment of the many cousins who volunteered to provide DNA samples.
Their participation was the key that unlocked the door after 100 years. It truly bridged that gap.
It did. Their willingness to participate is what allowed science to confirm the story.
So the identity mystery is solved, but you mentioned the core crime remains unsolved. Is there any hope of finding out more about what actually happened on the Hinton Road? Any leads left?
Well, the researchers who compiled this history do have one strong recommendation for potential future investigation. It involves going back to the official records.
Back to Choctaw County, Alabama.
Exactly. They suggest making a formal inquiry at the Choctaw County Court Archives
Looking for what specifically?
for the full, complete case files related to the original 1904 indictment. The State versus Calvin Haney, Joe Haney, and John Lewis.
Even though Joe Haney was never tried.
Yes, because Calvin Haney and John Lewis were tried and acquitted. Their trial records things like witness testimonies, maybe details about jury selection, the specific evidence presented by the prosecution and defense. Those documents might still exist.
And they could contain details about the incident itself.
Potentially, yes. They could hold clues, maybe even direct statements of the confrontation, the arguments, the sequence of events, who was present. It's possible those old files could shed light on the nature of the fatal disagreement.
Giving context, finally, to why Joe Haney fled and why Maddie made that incredible sacrifice.
It's a long shot, perhaps, after all this time. But those archived court records might just hold the closest thing to a final testimony about what truly happened on the Hinton Road.
The identity is known now, but the full story, maybe it's still waiting in an archive box somewhere.
A powerful thought, isn't it? The answer might be there, waiting for a persistent descendant to uncover it.
Well, thank you for walking us through this incredibly complex and moving story. That's all the time we have for this deep dive into the Hinton Road, a Southern family secret in the Deep South. We hope this exploration has been both informative and respectful for everyone connected to this history.